Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Monday edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe with Ashley Bastock, and we are going to get you ready for Brown's mandatory minicamp. They will practice Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We will be out there for all three. We got some player availability, some coach availability, so lots of coverage coming up here. The last kind of big Browns event before training camp. They'll take some time off and then report to training camp on July 22nd will be the first day of that at the Greenbrier in West Virginia. As Andrew Berry likes to say, let's be where our feet are. And let's talk about mandatory minicamp. And you put up a post on Monday morning, 3 things to watch at Brown's mandatory minicamp. So I figured we just kind of go through that. Maybe I'd add some things as we go. So why don't you start us off? What's number 1 on the list?
Yeah, so probably unsurprising for folks who have been hearing us talk about OTAs. Like, we've been very defensive centric and pass catcher centric for the most part. But I started out with the defense because for me, like, what I'm really interested to see this week is this will be the first time that we are going to see a Jim Schwartz scheme with all the key players there. And again, like, kind of like OTAs, like, we have to hedge our bets, right? Like, it's not full contact. Like, the defense isn't going to look exactly how it's going to look. But I'm really curious because Myles Garrett wasn't at either of the OTA sessions that we saw. Zadarius Smith and Dalvin Tomlinson were each only at one. So we really haven't seen those guys up front. And that's like the key part of a Jim Schwartz scheme, right? So the thing, like, with the caveat that contact isn't a thing, what I'm especially curious about is how Jim Schwartz is going to move those pieces around, because we've been speculating about it, right? And throughout the defense, we've seen him do some interesting things with moving players around and playing them in different spots. So, like, how much is Zadarius Smith going to line up inside? Is Myles going to line up inside? Who's going to be on the interior? Are we going to see multiple edge rushers out there at once? Are we going to see Obo Okoronkwo lining up more like a linebacker? Like, these are all things I'm really curious about, and it's really the first chance we're going to get to see them do that because all the key guys are actually going to have to be there.
Yeah, that's one of the things in like OTAs. It's so hard sometimes to get a read on the depth chart and kind of see where guys are lining, because with guys just not being there, sometimes you get a second stringer who's getting a lot of reps. Sometimes you get a third stringer who's getting a lot of reps. With Myles and Zadarius now back in the fold, we might get a better idea of kind of how Obo's going to look in all of this and where he's going to fit. And honestly, some of it is just eyeballs, right? I mean, when you used to walk out there and see Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney standing next to each other, it was like, oh, okay, this is pretty intimidating looking. So that's a big piece of it too. Like, I want to see Myles next to Zadarius, and I want to see all these interactions. And this is just a really good opportunity to see some of that stuff off to the side that you don't really get to see except for in the spring and during training camp. All right, so now the second thing you had moves to the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, so this is something, and we've like talked about how we haven't really been paying attention to this that much. We actually, I think, may have touched on it in a later in the week pod last week, but I'm really curious to see, like, again, Nick Chubb hasn't been at these practices that we've gotten to watch. So what's going on with the running backs and what's going on behind Nick Chubb? Because I think, like, for me personally, right, when we're only at 2 OTAs and Nick isn't there, like, watching the running backs for me became less of a priority compared to watching the defense, number one, and watching Deshaun with the pass catchers, number two, because those new guys were there. And every time we just kind of saw, like, I happened to see the running backs, in 11 on 11s or whatever, Jerome Ford was getting the ball, which, like, yeah, that's like to be expected, right? But I also am curious, like, we joke about the Scott Patsko Memorial Demetric Felton watch. Like, obviously, we've talked about this. Demetric is going, I think, in theory, to have more of an opportunity in the running back room without Kareem Hunt there now. And it seems like to me, his versatility being his strength, that might be where his opportunity to get on the field comes from. But without Kareem there, without Dearness Johnson there, it is a much bigger question of what those reps look like and who's going to be in what scenarios and who's maybe going to help, like, be a little bit more active in the passing game and things like that. Like, I do think, like, I do want to make, since we're out there 3 straight days, like, make a concerted effort to watch what those guys are doing, just because, like, without Nick there, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, like, that can wait. That was kind of my thinking the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and going back to Dimitrik, it's kind of like, how are you going to get on the field, right? Like, where's the spot for you? Because at receiver, you've got Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Elijah Moore, Marquise Goodwin. I don't think they're going to bail on David Bell. We'll see what happens. Obviously, Anthony Schwartz is a guy who's on the bubble, but you've got bodies at receiver that they're going to throw out there and that they want to get on the field. So kind of weirdly, the spot now is running back because Kareem Hunt's gone and Dearness Johnson is gone, and it is kind of wide open after Nick Chubb. So that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch. And I do wonder if we're going to see a little bit of what that quarterback run game can look like. I know
Yeah.
I know that's hard to do when you can't hit the quarterback and there's no contact, and obviously they want to protect Deshaun Watson, but I wonder with Nick Chubb in the fold now if we'll see a little bit more of kind of what that quarterback run game might look like. But I do know Kevin has said in the past he sort of views the spring as a passing camp, which is why we see so much
Yeah.
7-on-7 and you don't see a lot of the run game. But I'd like to see. So, is there some read option? Does this sort of look like Philadelphia a little bit? Um, I would love to kind of get a preview of that too.
Yeah, and I remember even last year,